Hi all, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ivana. I like to read, and today I'm going to walk you through the 6 books I read in September. So this is kind of a late September wrap-up / recent reads. I spent a lot of time this past month vlogging and I really enjoyed it. So that's why it's taken me so long to record this. So we only have 6 books and some of them I read a while back. So my memory might be a little fuzzy. We're gonna work with what we got with my noggin and we're gonna get started. So the first book I actually got to was BABEL by RF Kuang. I was actually able to get this one through the Lucky Day collection in the library. I kept putting off reading this book. It was highly anticipated, and the reason I did that was because I was intimidated by its size and I kept seeing it in the Lucky Day collection of the library. So it kept calling my name. One day I saw Fourth Wing and it was even bigger than BABEL, and I was like, oh, I should hate read this book. And then I was like, you know what? You need to cut that out. Like, you need to just go ahead and read BABEL. And so that's what I did. They had both available. And so that's the book I picked up. And I didn't realize this, but it's also on Scribd. So I actually mostly audiobooked it. Now, if you're on the same boat that I was and you really don't want to read it yet because you feel like you're not ready for it, or you feel intimidated, or you feel like you can't grasp it, I'm going to highly recommend the audiobook because it actually has 2 voice actors. One does the footnotes and one does the actual narration of the story, and they're very distinct voices, so it's refreshing. Also, the main narrator's voice is so soothing, and honestly, even though the book was about violence and colonialism and like really heavy topics like racism, the audiobook gave me a cozy feeling, and I still feel like I would have gotten that cozy feeling had I physically read the book as well. It felt like a new classic, and the campus setting, you know, it is dark academia, but for some reason, I don't know what it is with me and campus novels, but I love them. And so I really like that aspect of it, and I feel like I need to back up a little bit and talk to you about what the book is about in case you haven't read it yet. The book is set in the 1800s. It starts out with a scene where a boy from Canton is basically on his deathbed. Everybody around him has died from disease. He's orphaned. And this British man, who also happens to be an Oxford professor, shows up at his house and does something with silver, and he actually saves the boy. The boy's name is Robin, and he's like, I'm gonna take you to England and you are going to learn all of these languages. For some reason, he already had a tutor in Canton. In addition to speaking Chinese, he also spoke English. But Professor Lovell was like, you're gonna continue learning these languages and Latin and Greek, and the goal is for you to go to the Translation Institute at Oxford, or BABEL. The audiobook narrator says Babel, but he has a British accent. And so the book is a mix of historical fiction, fantasy, because the actual magic, like I said, is based on silver, and also translation and words that have multiple meanings. As someone who went to grad school to study language acquisition and some linguistics, I love that aspect about like the importance of translation and this idea that an act of translation is in a way a betrayal, and how language just has so much power and language is used to keep people in power. And there's just so much to unpack from all of the information, and like the book is so information heavy and so detailed, and the footnotes are so long. Like, RF Kuang is currently getting her PhD, I believe, in Yale, and I don't know what the PhD is on, but she like is clearly very well read and is willing to teach her audience about linguistics, about history, about colonialism and its horrors. She points out that people really don't appreciate the work that goes into translating, how it's really impossible to fully capture the essence of a text in a different language because there's so many nuances to words, and she gives so many examples. Was the story didactic at times? Of course it was, but it also said some really profound things. It also was philosophical, and I kind of like that. I'm gonna read you a passage that I really liked, and it's on my computer. Translation means doing violence upon the original. It means warping and distorting it for foreign, unintended eyes. So where does that leave us? How can we conclude except by acknowledging that an act of translation is always an act of betrayal? Another thing that I thought was interesting was these ideas about resistance and these ideas about internalized oppression. The story follows a band of friends, and most of them are people of color, and they become friends at Oxford. Like, they're all translators and they're all outcasts because of the way that they look, because of their race, or because of their gender. And they really are treated terribly by the Oxford students who are white men. And I think some people might think that some of it was heavy-handed and a little on the nose. I also feel like that is how they would be treated. Like, how else are you going to depict it? I don't want to give too much away, but there's also a mysterious secret society that is trying to resist what the translators are doing. And so there's this whole conversation about resistance and what does it mean to resist? When is violence justified? I believe the byline of the book is the necessity of violence. So there's a lot of discussion about violence and when violence is justified. And there's just a lot of talk about like oppression and internalized oppression. And another passage I wanted to share was all about how resistance can feel traitorous when that's all you've been taught, like to believe your oppressor or to kind of admire the oppressor and want to be like the oppressor. And the passage goes like this. It says, "This is how colonialism works. It convinces us that the fallout from resistance is entirely our fault, that the immoral choice is resistance itself rather than the circumstances that demand it." I think this book is so powerful, and the ending was so good. It couldn't have ended any other way. Like, I really liked that ending. It was heartbreaking though. I'm not gonna say anything else. If you were on the fence about Babel, I feel like maybe give it a chance and listen to it and let me know what you think if you haven't read it already. I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, but I loved it. I don't want to pretend that I didn't take notes because I had to take notes because I forgot a lot of what I read. So here's my computer. Hello. The next book that I read was Homebodies by Tembe Denton-Hurst. And this book is about a Black woman who is in her 30s, I believe, or maybe late 20s. And she works at a predominantly white media job. And she's really messy and she's queer, and you can see where this is going maybe. So she is like fed up with her job. She's tired of being treated like less than human. And it's not on the nose, it's a little bit more masked, but like clearly her boss doesn't trust her because she's a Black woman. And so she hears that she's getting laid off / fired, and she's like, you know what? I'm gonna write a letter to expose everyone. And so she writes a letter and she thinks about posting it on Twitter or X. And she like thinks about it, and then she gets drunk one night. This is all in the back of the book, by the way. But she gets drunk and she posts it on Twitter. And then like nothing happens. She's like, wait, I thought I was gonna go viral. So then she's having a lot of problems with her girlfriend, and she's like, you know what? She lives in New York City, and she's like, you know what? I'm going back home to Maryland. I have no money. I don't have a job. I hate everything. I'm just gonna go back home. And so then it's like show after show after show after show. And she's also like super into her ex. I don't even think they dated, but Mickey's just making like very bad choices and trying to figure stuff out. Honestly, when I started the book, it felt like very online and very like contemporary. There were like references to a lot of things that might not be popular like 10 years from now or whatever. So it was very modern. I was expecting like a literary fiction novel, and it was clearly a contemporary book, which is fine. It was more commercial than I was expecting it to be, and I sound like a pretentious saying that. But yeah, it is reminiscent of Central Places and also Town of Babylon, but it just like didn't hit as hard as Central Places did. And I'm not saying that like people need to change at the end of books and things need to happen, but it was just a little slow for me, even though I read it in one day. It wasn't a favorite, it was just okay. I don't regret reading it though. Okay, so the next book that I read, I actually have a physical copy of it, and it is A Girl in a Body in the World by Deb Caletti, who actually wrote Honey Baby Sweetheart, and what was the other one? The Queen of Everything was like one of my faves growing up. And I didn't know she was still writing books because those books were popular in the early 2000s. This book is really sad. It's really powerful. I actually checked it out from the library because my name is Marines suggested it on TikTok because she's known for like critiquing books, but she was like, you know what? I want to talk about books that I actually like. And so this is a YA book. It's about a high school senior girl who has experienced something traumatic, and we don't know what it is, and it slowly gets revealed. And in order to cope with the trauma that she has had to endure, she actually decides to run cross country to DC. And I'm a runner. I love running. This book just made me want to go outside and run. It was like therapeutic. It was really sad. Like I cried a couple times. I love the angst. At the start of every chapter, there were like facts about the heart. And it was a really nice book to read before bed, little by little. It was one of those books where It was sad, but it was also like it had a great resolution and it was really heartwarming. And the dynamics between our narrator, even though our narrator was like angsty and like sad, she still had such precious relationships with her family members and her friends. And there's also a little bit of romance. It was just like a healing book. It soothed my soul, and I strongly recommend this one. It's getting darker, so let's finish this. So the next book I read was PEDRO, PÁRAMO. I cannot find my copy. I'm supposed to mail it to Kat, and I don't know where it is, but I'll show you a picture of it. I feel like I've talked about this book in all of my previous videos, so I'm just gonna keep it short. Essentially, this book is about a man who goes to a town to find his dad, whom he never met because his mom's dying wish was for him to meet his dad. And we get to hear about a ghost town. It's a short book. It's very influential. It started the magical realism genre. It's spooky, so it was a good like Halloween-y kind of read. But at the end of the day, I just didn't care. I feel really bad saying that, but it's a classic. I read it. I can see why people thought it was good, but maybe I like the material that it influenced better. And that's okay, right? Please tell me that's all right. Okay, so the next book is All Our Hidden Gifts by Caroline O'Donoghue, the author of The Rachel Incident. I've talked about this book before many times because it's been my TBR and stuff. It follows an Irish girl who gets attention and is in the basement of her old Catholic high school, and she finds a tarot card set. She starts a business where she does people's tarot in her school. She finds out that she has this card that doesn't actually exist called the Housekeeper. She might have accidentally cursed her ex-best friend with the Housekeeper, and then she's like dying to find her. And she obviously like clearly regrets it, and so she's trying to make amends. This book is funny. It's queer, it's angsty, it's everything you want it to be. It's not a favorite, but it's pretty solid, and I can't wait to read the rest. So the last book that I read was The Witch of Wild Things by Raquel, Vasquez, Gilliland, and I read this one in my latest vlog and I adored it. The author of this book is actually a poet, and I forgot that I dog-eared some pages because it has such beautiful passages. This is not your standard issue romance, or maybe it is, but it's good. It's better written than most romances I've read. This book is about a 30-something-year-old woman named Sage who has been away from her hometown for 8 years, and she returns after some things happen and she gets fired from her job. She has special powers. Her powers have to do with plants. And so this is kind of like magical realisty. It's not full fantasy. She's being haunted by the ghost of her sister, and she has another sister that she doesn't have a great relationship with. And so you get to see those family dynamics. I really loved it. I love the vibes. I love all the plant stuff. So Sage gets a job working with plants at like a plant shop, and she's like out there foraging, like trying to find different plants, because when she touches a plant, she like knows what plant it is or what flower it is. It's just a very vibey book, and it feels very fall. The problem is that she ends up working with her ex-boyfriend, and so there's some tension there. It was just warm and fuzzy and angsty. Again, sensing a trend here, the last 3 books I've said are angsty, and that's kind of what I like. This book has made me want to reread her backlist because she has previously written YA books. This is her first adult book, and it was just really nice. I don't know what else to say other than if you're looking for a comforting read, this might soothe your soul. I know I recommended it to Taz and she loved it, so if you feel like swooning and turning your brain off for a little bit, I highly recommend this one. It's not cloyingly sweet. So there you have it. These are my recent reads. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these and if you have any opinions about them. I hope you guys are taking care of yourselves, and I hope you're having a really good fall. See you in my next video. Bye!